Hey, what's up, everybody, and welcome to my 3 Takeaways episode from the Jim Davidson interview this past Monday. I hope you guys loved his story. If you were at all fascinated by that story, you've got to go check out his book called The Ledge. It's all about his story with a tragic accident with Mike Price, and it's really cool because he kind of goes back and forth in the book between his childhood with a lot of the lessons that he learned from his dad, from the job that he had running a painting company when he was young, and the crazy jobs that he did. And it's basically really cool because all those childhood experiences led him up to preparing him for that moment almost. And then it goes through almost like minute by minute in some instances about the tragic accident that happened. And it's really captivating because you just want to flip the page and see what happened next. And it's so tragic, but in the end, it's so inspiring. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in the takeaways. But make sure you go check out The Ledge. You can find it anywhere. You can find it on Amazon. And then you can learn more about Jim at speakingofadventure.com. But with that said, let's get right into my 3 takeaways. Number 1 is use your post-traumatic growth to serve. And this is basically the theme of the entire episode because throughout his entire life, Jim has had experience and then he's taken lessons from those experiences. But it's really important to spend the time outside of those experiences to figure out what the lessons are that you actually learn. Sometimes it's hard to be aware of the lessons when you're actually going through it. So you need to take the time afterwards to actually discern what those lessons are. And that's really what we people mean when they say learn from your failure. It's like you're not going to learn anything necessarily when you're going through the failure. Like that just sucks. But you have to take the time afterwards to figure out what the lessons are. Because if you don't take that time, then failure is just failure. You don't have any opportunity for growth afterwards. But it's about taking the time to actually break down what happened and then figure out what you can do now to move forward and minimize the likelihood of that happening again. And I've had that happen in my life where with this podcast, there have been a couple times where I forgot to turn the microphone on. I forgot to crop the camera correctly. Just a number of small things that, well, those are big things, but also a number of small things that I've done wrong with the podcast. But now I've made ways, I've created checklists for myself that to minimize the likelihood of that happening again, and a lot of those things have not happened since. That's been a huge thing for me. Takeaway number 2 is enjoy the ride. Don't get hung up on the result. And I thought this was crazy because I never really thought about it like this with climbers, but climbers can sometimes prepare for so long, for 6 months, for a year, for 5 years, for 10 years, for one of the biggest climbs of their life, like Mount Everest or something like Mount Rainier. And then the day of the climb, the weather could be super bad and you can't even climb. You could sprain your ankle. Your partner could sprain your ankles, like he said. And if that happens, you can't actually do the particular thing. So you can't get so hung up on the actual success, the actual result, or as he said, summiting and waving the flag with that quick picture. But you have to enjoy the experience and you have to be aware of the lessons that you learn along the journey, the relationships that you build and all that sort of thing. Because if you're aware of those things and you pay attention to the small wins, you get so much more out of the journey. And that's one of the things that I'm really actually doing a lot better of working on right now is enjoying the journey over the destination. Because so many times I think like, I'm going to be so much happier once I get this. I'm going to be so much happier when I've succeeded here or when I've had this many downloads, yada, yada, yada. But it's like, enjoy the process, like enjoy the small wins that I have every single day. And I know that I have to be patient and it's going to take time or else it wouldn't be as gratifying as it's going to be in the long run, but it's all about the journey. And then number 3 is be aware and accept, because that is what allows you to be resilient during a pressure situation. And that's one of the things I asked him, because he's kind of a resilience expert. That's what he kind of calls himself, and that's what he speaks on when he does motivational speaking. So I said, what are 2 key things that you can do to increase your level of resilience during a pressure situation? And he said, number 1, you have to be aware of what's going on. Like you have to be very aware of the different things that are happening. If the weather's going bad on a climb, you have to note, okay, here's what's going wrong, and then you have to accept it. Because this number 2, this is really the biggest step. If you don't accept the situation or what's going on, then how the heck do you think that you're going to start taking action steps on countering whatever is going on? Like if he says the weather is bad and he accepts it, then he can start figuring out different ways and the creative juices can start flowing in his mind about how he can start making adjustments. But if he doesn't fully accept it, if he's like, oh, maybe it's going to go away, then he's just putting himself in a deeper and deeper hole. So you have to find a way to really accept the situation and then make adjustments. But again, guys, my 3 takeaways. Number 1 is use your post-traumatic growth to serve. Make sure if you have a negative situation, if you have a failure, that you take the time to assess what actually happened, discern the lessons so that you can minimize the likelihood of that happening to you again, but that you can also communicate that with others, because only if you're aware can you communicate that clearly. Number 2 is enjoy the ride. Don't get hung up on the result. Make sure you're aware of the experiences that you're having, the small wins that you're having, the relationships that you're building along the journey, because that's really the things that are going to be most fulfilling to you rather than that just end result. Number 3 is be aware and accept equals resilient. If you're in a pressure situation, be very aware of what's going on in your surroundings and then accept it, because when you accept, the creative juices can start flowing to figure out how you can counter that situation. I hope you guys really enjoyed the episode. Make sure, if you have not checked it out yet, that you go to nickcarrier.com/podcast where you can find the YouTube video and the audio. Make sure you subscribe to the show if you have not yet already. Make sure you rate and review, all that good stuff to support the show. And go to speakingofadventure.com to learn a little bit more about Jim. But other than that, guys, I hope you enjoyed these 3 takeaways. I hope you enjoyed Jim Davidson, and I hope he allowed you to get a little bit closer and closer to your best you.